Hello, everyone. Let's unwind after a hard week with these stories that will both astound and delight you. Welcome to this week's Roundup. This is for you if you missed some of our videos or simply wish to rewatch them. Like and subscribe to receive more stories like this. Remember to provide the timestamp of your recommended content in the comment area. What are teens today not ready to hear? Story 1. In the adult world, getting into fights doesn't make you look cool, it just makes you look stupid. And one wrong fight can leave you brain damaged or on trial for manslaughter. I know someone who was drunk and another much drunker guy came up to them looking for a fight. Long story short, the guy defended himself. The aggressive man had an undiagnosed tumor in his brain which ruptured and he died. Now this guy has to live with this for the rest of his life due to someone being idiotic. Luckily, they got off with no jail time as it was self-defense, and they were both drunk and obviously undiagnosed. But I think the mental damage of having killed someone accidentally is punishment enough. I wonder if the brain tumor could have been part of the reason he was being so weirdly aggressive. Could have been totally unrelated, but those things can totally mess with your personality. Very sad story. Poor guy defending himself didn't ask for that. It 100% changes you. Living in constant pain, whether or not you recognize it's there, will make you a very angry, sad, bitter person. I was in chronic body pain for a long time from many injuries. Constant scrutinizing pain. Went on an acid trip and I felt my body without pain for the first time in a long time. I've been chasing that ever since through yoga, mobility, meditatic techniques. I feel more aggressive and hostile when the pain level goes up. I get very easily irritated. I was about to say that this kind of got a little off topic from, just giving teenagers some advice that they need to hear or whatever, but no, teenagers, you probably needed to hear all of that because a lot of that too is just connected with growing up. It's tough and getting into fights and having to live with what you've done in your life, it can add up and you don't want to do that. So avoid making those mistakes. Try to avoid fights if you can. Story 2. Just because it's new to you doesn't mean it's new. I majored in literature in college, I teach now, and I remember 18 to 21-year-old me being fascinated by how human nature stayed the same from hundreds of years ago. At that age, I couldn't fathom that those old people actually made intercourse jokes or had certain technologies. Reading across the ages really made me wiser and hip to the fact that humans are basically all the same. We just have different settings we grow up in. Same thing across country/cultural lines. I remember when I traveled to India and the culture shock was super jarring. Felt like I had teleported to a different universe. Then when we were driving around Agra, I saw a group of teenage boys cracking up and pointing. Those efforts had drawn the most glorious, veiniest D that I'd ever seen on the wall in chalk. Doesn't matter if you live in India, Germany, Egypt, or the USA, everyone draws and laughs at D's. Laugh my butt off. The great unifier. One of the more embarrassing things you realize as your perspective widens in college is how often adults were just humoring you as you explained things about the world as though they hadn't been common knowledge for half a century. I think the lesson that you should really learn here, teens, and a lesson that should stay with you even when you're an adult, is you're always going to be learning new things and realizing that the you from however many years ago didn't know nearly as much as they thought they knew. So as much as we adults might say, you're a teenager, you don't understand it yet, you don't know, but you will. Same for me. I am over twice your age, no matter what kind of teenager you are at this point, I think. And in 5-10 years, I will look back at me now and be like, the things I didn't know. So, don't sweat it. Story 3. As you get older, you just keep realizing how dumb you were last year. Every day I realize how stupid I was the day before. I'm a teen, and it's honestly incredibly satisfying looking back at how much of an idiot I was because I know that feeling that way about my past self means I've grown. I'm 27 now, and every year or two I'm just shocked at how ignorant I was, and I'm reminded that I'm still ignorant as F and need to remain curious, challenging myself, changing my beliefs. My parents did none of those things, experienced no meaningful paradigm shifts, have had the same beliefs for decades on end, and they're pretty abhorrent people. So while sometimes it feels bad man.jpg to remember I was and always will be ignorant, it's also reassuring because it means I'm doing something right, like you said. 36 here. The best piece of advice I ever tell all the young crowd is we don't have a damn clue what we're doing, there aren't any instructions, no instinctual takeover. The most you get is you get a lot of practice at having the mindset of F it, we'll do it live every day of your life. Story 4. The older you get, the faster it goes. Yesterday, I was you. Tomorrow, you'll be me. One day, you'll wake up and wonder where that plenty of time to do X went. It will scare the crap out of you. Pink Floyd said it perfectly. Tired of lying in the sunshine, staying home to watch the rain. You are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today. And then one day, you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun. Yep, when you're 14, 7 years is an eternity because it's half of your life. That is not the case when you are 40 and almost lived 7 years 6 times over. It's been 4 years since I left my last relationship, and it feels like yesterday. I haven't dated or had intercourse in that time, and it doesn't even feel like a problem. I'm still like, oh, I just got out of a relationship. Not ready yet. I found making new experiences slows life down. Taking trips, going camping, hiking trails, attending festivals, and having fewer events you can't wait for help. What I mean by that is having few faraway events you constantly and intensely look forward to. There's a few tricks to achieve this, in my opinion. Stay busy. If you want to plan a big trip far from now, do so. However, plan trips, events, or other things to occupy your anticipation. The goal is to slow your perception of time by focusing on the now rather than the future.
All of this is very true. Life will really start to fly by if you're not careful. The older you get, I remember as a kid, a year seemed to take forever. And nowadays, I'm 39. I will be 40 in a day, literally. And I'm a year past, 2 years past, it feels like no time whatsoever unless you're doing stuff. Keep yourself active. Don't just rest on your laurels. And sure, take breaks. Take time to relax and enjoy life, Don't stress yourself out. But yeah, give yourself experiences. Don't lose that because, man, I've seen some older people who just retire and do nothing. And you can see them wrinkling and turning to dust in real time.
Story 5. You're closer to being the oldest person in any given setting than you think. And by old, I mean 30. Got nieces and nephews just starting kindergarten? Blink, and they're starting college. Agreed. We're having my mother's memorial this coming weekend, and it keeps striking me as bizarre that we are now the adults. We went from 14 to 45 in the blink of an eye, it seems. Same. My dad passed away a few weeks ago and we just had his memorial. Seeing his friends and people he worked with that I haven't seen in 30 years just hit me in the face how old I am now. I'm 31 and realizing I'm at the point now where I'm really losing people. My 29-year-old sister died 2 weeks ago and both my parents are not in great health, and that sure didn't help it. As older relatives pass away, the extended family becomes segmented and caught up in their own more immediate families. Things are becoming lonelier. Edit. Thanks everyone for the kind words. I'm convinced my cousin is still 8 years old. Admittedly, that's unlikely as she's recently gotten a degree in astrophysics. But I don't live with her or anything. Maybe she's just a really smart kid? Story 6. Being controversial isn't the same as being interesting. Contrarianism isn't wisdom. Oh, and you're gonna wish you learned not to be a D. Turns out social skills are useful post-college.
I'm sorry, is this supposed to be advice for teenagers or just advice for people who are chronically online? Because, let me tell you, this is not something I'm pointing a finger at teenagers for, because I've seen many more adults online who have a problem with this, myself at sometimes included.
Story 7. Putting every aspect of yourself online is unsafe. Nobody needs to know your list of triggers or your address or your blood type. So many teens have their location data available on Snapchat for all their Snapchat friends to see just 'cause. I would never show my real-time location data to all my Facebook friends, so why do so many people do it with Snapchat eludes me. So many people on those contact lists you just casually know, and they're not actually friends, so they don't need to know my location. It's creepy as F in my opinion. Story 8. One day you too will be old and uncool, and it'll happen faster than you think. I used to be with it, then they changed what it was, and what is now it is weird and scary. It will happen to you. Abe Simpson, more or less. So I tied an onion to my belt, which was the style at the time. Now to take the ferry costs a nickel, and in those days nickels had pictures of bumblebees on them. Give me 5 bees for a quarter, you'd say. Now where were we? Oh yeah, the important thing was that I had an onion on my belt, which was the style at the time. They didn't have white onions because of the war. The only thing you could get were the big yellow ones. When I was like 25 and my stepbrother chuckled at me and said, "Nobody says stoked anymore," I had the moment for the first time. The moments have only increased since.
All right, Mr. Facts, story time. Because I had this moment, and I had this moment when I was in my earlier 30s. I was working at a job, and I had a younger coworker who was 18 or 19 at the time. And he referred to something as on fleek. So that already dates how long ago this was, I'm sure, for some of you. And he said that, and I said, well, what the heck does on fleek mean? And I genuinely didn't know. And my reaction was genuinely like that irritated. Just like, what the hell does on fleek mean? And he said, well, it means like, like fashionable or on point. And not even trying to be ironic, not trying to be a curmudgeonly old man, I literally got upset and went, well, why the hell wouldn't you just say that? And he stared at me and went, dude, how old are you? And I wanted to weep.
Which hobbies that people do scream rich people?
Story 1. A friend of ours got a wildly expensive cappuccino machine from his wife for Christmas. She didn't think there was room for it in their huge gourmet kitchen, so they had a whole coffee station with cabinets and drawers and a built-in mini fridge and marble countertops installed in the adjoining breakfast area. This was all because they got tired of driving to Starbucks twice a day. Oh, and they sent us home with an Xbox One the other night because they just bought whatever the new one is, X, and had no use for it. LOL, nicest people, just wildly wealthy. I had a rich boyfriend who didn't realize it wasn't normal to throw away stuff you pre-ordered just because it didn't live up to expectations. He had a 4-day-old Xbox One he was going to throw away because he wanted the PS4 more. Guess who got a free Xbox One? I had a friend who threw away her spare change 2 or 3 quid at a time, and it boiled my pee. She could have saved it or donated it, but she couldn't be bothered, so in the bin it went. What? And I cannot stress this enough, the F. When I worked in a campus cafe during college, a guy literally threw his change away in front of me and said to the girl he was with, who was looking at him in disbelief, "What? I don't carry change. I'm not poor." Everyone stopped and there was silence, and then I was just like, Jesus Christ, dude. And he left. Wound up going to grad school with him. He absolutely remembered the incident, and the look on his face when I walked in was priceless. Dude got his butt handed to him in first semester, including being totally annihilated by professors at least twice. I only saw it happen twice, but I'm sure it happened other times too. Asked a few classmates out and acted like a teenager when they said no / was not able to comprehend what they weren't their why they weren't their flipping husbands, and just stopped showing up midway through the second semester before resurfacing at a happy hour just to basically brag about deciding to go to law school. Shocker, at the same place his dad and dad's dad and dad's dad's dad all went and routinely donated to. He said, "Okay, fine, whatever, I just thought I could share good news with my peers, F me, I guess," when no one cared. We're friends on social media. I can't tell if he ever finished, but he basically just travels and pretends he has a cool life that he categorically does not. And yet, the FU wealthy international students were still far and away the most entitled, worst people I've ever met. Nothing like getting snapped at in class by a guy your age who wants you to go to the lunch cart for him. Higher education. Well, just from that one story, we've gotten to see the nicer rich people who at least give some of their, old stuff to friends, to the completely inconsiderate rich people so out of touch with reality that they may never make a really true human connection in their entire life. And I do kind of feel bad for them about that. Parents, if you got a whole lot of money, I know you want to give your kids everything, but maybe what you should give them is a respect for what things are worth and a good work ethic or something. I don't know.
Story 2. We had a meet and greet with a new executive at my company, and she told us one of her hobbies is investing in real estate. The frustrating thing about having money makes money is that if you have the money to do this, it's a great financial decision. For a small-scale example, I dated a woman in college who had a rather wealthy mother. Instead of renting a place to live for her daughter, she just bought an apartment close to campus and then sold it when my ex graduated. Because the rent she charged my ex's roommate covered both upkeep and the mortgage, she not only broke even, but probably turned a profit, while the rest of us were in the negative for paying rent, even though we didn't have as much money. If I had the money to do that, I'd invest in real estate as a hobby too. I lived in that situation. The guy was a VP at a publishing house and bought a 5-bedroom house in a neighborhood near campus for his daughter while she was in college. He paid her to manage it and rented out the other 4 rooms. The place was nicely furnished and full of books from the publisher. It was a great setup, until the daughter got pregnant and had to go home at the end of the first year. Sadly, I had to move out into a standard university ghetto apartment for the next year. Same situation when I was in college. A friend with wealthy parents bought a house for him to live in while he was going to college, and the additional rooms were rented out to some of his friends. Even at a discounted rent, they more than covered the mortgage, insurance, and upkeep and then turned a profit. That's why it's so difficult for people born into wealth to grasp how truly difficult it is to make money when you're poor. They think, if I can easily make money, then everyone can. Poor people are just lazy or bad at managing their finances. Because it's easier to believe that than admit that you had a massive advantage in life from the get-go. I had a rich homie whose parents are both doctors. His entire college and dorm was paid for in full out of pocket. A different buddy and I were making a whole plan about how we could start at the local community college for the associate's degree, then get loans after the associate's degree, and rich homie chimed in, "Why would you get a loan? Why don't you guys just pay for it up front? It's not that much," says the kid who didn't put a single penny into his college. Shout out, community college is a beautiful thing. They have so many programs, grants, scholarships to alleviate costs on top of being super affordable. It's either dirt cheap or free.
I'm not going to get mad about the housing market. I'm not going to get mad about real estate in general and all this other crap that just makes me so mad. Instead, I'm just going to be like, what?
Story 3. Not really a hobby, but I worked for a boutique private doctor company. They cater to the very rich. Membership fee, $40,000 a year per person, not including their insurance, and these are just some of the things that are included. You have a medical team, your primary, a nurse, cardiologist, OBGYN, physical therapist, nutritionist, etc. just for you. Need an appointment for anything? They'll work around your schedule. Yearly checkup, 2 hours with your primary doctor and your medical team at the clinic or your house. They craft a yearly wellness plan for you and track it monthly. Lab work? In-house at the clinic or at your house. The nurse will call you within 24 hours with the results and explain them to you in great detail. You have your doctor's mobile number and email address, and you can reach out to them 24/7 with questions or concerns. Are you traveling domestically or internationally? They will provide you with top-tier doctors wherever you are, or have your personal doctor and nurse fly out. Are you having a medical emergency? Your doctor and nurse will meet you at the ER and have a private room ready for you with a specialist if needed. Don't feel like going to the doctor's office? They will go wherever you are. Insurance or billing questions? You don't worry, they will navigate that for you. Clients, celebrities, politicians, CEOs, the 1%. That sounds so much more actually desirable than a lot of things we hear about rich people blowing money on. Honestly, if I had the kind of money where I could afford that, yeah, I would 100% be doing that. Sure beats having to make an appointment with my GP 6 weeks in advance. Also, benzos essentially on demand. I once had to take someone from India to Mayo Clinic by ambulance. Her very important personal status meant we had to hire doctor and nurse with us in the truck administering benzos every 2 hours like clockwork because she got anxious from sitting backwards. The only reason she went by ambulance was because she had been abusive to the air ambulance staff in the past. Story 4. My neighbor is a yachtsman who makes a middle-class living racing rich people's yachts, so I would say hiring people to indulge your hobbies is about as 1% as one can get. Sounds like an interesting job. He gets to spend far more time yachting than the actual owner. Not too different from merchant families being patrons for artists during the Renaissance or billionaires buying sports teams. They love the hobby, but they know they can't replicate the talent. How amazing must it be, though, to have the money to be able to hire a full-time artist who just paints whatever you commission them to? Like a personal chef with a canvas instead of a stove. F the sports teams and boats, I want someone to produce one-of-a-kind art for me on a whim, and I want to pay them enough to live handsomely off that alone.
Okay, the commissioning an artist, I get, because you're helping to bring some art in the world. Granted, you're probably telling them what to make, and I don't know, as some rich person just hiring an artist, I feel like maybe you're not the most creative person, but the artist will find ways to make fun of you in their artwork, and that'll be great. Just like Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. The people who are hiring people to race their yachts, what? That's pretty funny to me. If I met a rich person who told me that, I wouldn't be able to stop laughing. I would have to walk away.
Story 5. Bartender here. 2 very cute girls from out of town sat at my bar. Equally cute guy walks in, immediately buys them drinks. His opener was, "So, how often do you gals boat?" They were from effing Philly, LOL. When he said that, I couldn't not smirk at it. He also tipped me like $130 for 3 Jameson Cokes. We only motorboat when we're really drunk. Yeah, boating is expensive as F. Wouldn't call it a rich hobby down here in Florida, though. You'll see plenty of dilapidated houses with a nice fishing boat out front. Depends on where you are in your background. My friend and I grew up effing around on boats, doing it dirt cheap. Growing up in a fishing town with not much else to do, you find a way. Buy an old unwanted hull, a non-running outboard engine older than me, work on it ourselves, and get out on the sea. Breaking down and learning how to fix things is just part of the fun. Boating is a very broad spectrum, from kayaks to super yachts. What was ruined because too many people did it?
Story 1. Airbnb. Used to love Airbnb years ago. Now it's pricier than a lot of decent hotels, and some of the house rules are nutty. My friend gave me a discount coupon for one. I compared it to a local hotel, and the hotel was cheaper with fewer rules. My hotel doesn't expect me to leave the room in pristine shape. I leave the towels in the tub and pick up all the garbage, but I'm not expected to vacuum and dust. For real, I stayed at an Airbnb once on a ski trip, and it was clearly the people's family home, so not like a random rental. We cleaned all the sheets, pillowcases, towels, wiped down the countertops, ran the dishwasher, swept. Then we got a message from them because they were upset we put a wooden spoon in the dishwasher. I guess in the 40-page manual they left, it said not to. They couldn't believe we hadn't read the entire thing cover to cover, and on top of that, there are always crazy cleaning fees. Like, why am I paying a $150 cleaning fee on top of cleaning your house? The high cleaning fee is just a way to lower the price in searches. Doesn't work anymore though. Lower rental prices, higher cleaning fee, like charging really high shipping on eBay. Also, Airbnb takes a portion of the price, but does not take a portion of the cleaning fee. It's become a way to make a few extra dollars that Airbnb doesn't tax. It's the same as online sellers on eBay, Etsy, etc., who charge exorbitant shipping fees. It's just a way to skim from the company. And like, more power to you, but it's such a headache to try to book somewhere and while booking find out the reasonable booking is ridiculously higher than expected. Also, sorry, but if I'm paying $100+ for a cleaning fee, I will not be stripping the beds. I always do reasonable tidying anywhere I stay, but I'm not spending the last day of my stay deep cleaning. Edit. Please stop replying to me about eBay. Apparently they've changed their practices since I last used it, likely due to the aforementioned reason. And as you can see, it's already been addressed by other users ad nauseum. Airbnb is so big, it's killing the town I live in. I live in a tourist town up on top of a mountain, and up until the Airbnbs got big hotels and a handful of dedicated rental cabins were enough to accommodate for the tourists we get. Now, half the houses in town are exclusively vacation rentals. People are being evicted to make room for more every day, and there's nobody left to work at any of our businesses, and the price of literally everything has risen far above the price it would be in any other town. Edit. I already answered where I'm talking about, so you can stop asking. Kind of depressing that there are so many places that people immediately think of when I say this, though. I attempted to use Airbnb once, and I'll never try again. Booked a private entrance room in someone's house for almost a month while I was going to be on leave back in the States. The day before I'm set to check in, they contact me on the website saying that the room wasn't available because they turned it into their baby's nursery 7 months ago. Airbnb tried to fight me so hard to refund everything, but it was a completely false listing, so I got all my money back after a several hour-long phone call. Ridiculous. The hotel room I ended up getting actually was cheaper, and it had a kitchen, plus cleaning and no baby crying. I'll stick to hotels every time. F Airbnb. Airbnb started off as such a nice idea. Oh, you're, going to be away from your house, for a month or so and want to make a little extra cash, or maybe you've just got a spare room and you want to help someone out for way cheaper than a hotel? Airbnb. But of course, people and companies saw dollar signs and abused the system and ruined the real estate market in some areas, ruined the economy in, touristy places and stuff, and just kind of ruined everything. So yeah, what started off as kind of a nice concept really just turned to crap.
Story 2. The Appalachian Trail. People leaving their trash everywhere is really ruining the trail, and it's so effing crowded now. People who litter on trails or campsites or in general annoy the F out of me. If you brought it in, you are fully capable of bringing it out. Do you actually like being out in nature if you leave your trash in it? People are pigs. I work in a store and people leave garbage and half-eaten food sample stuffs in amongst the products. Adults blame kids, but there's no kid tall enough to reach the spots I've found gross garbage. People could have a garbage can attached to their hip and they'd still find a place on the ground to throw it. Usually they're not too bright either. Same people who trash public bathrooms and scream in hotels at 2 in the morning. Litterbugs are some of the worst people. We take trash bags when we go hiking and pick up whatever we see. One time we were doing it, a bunch of kids were around and they started picking up trash and bringing it to us. It was pretty amazing. I sharpened some sticks up for them to stab the trash with, and they really seemed to like stabbing trash, so it made it fun for them. What really made us mad was there was a trash can within sight that the litterbugs could have used. I live in Appalachia, and the tourists coming in to hike and camp have kind of ruined the local wildlands. A lot of them are absolutely filthy and tend to be super condescending and rude to locals for some reason. Nowadays, a lot of our natural trails through the mountains are covered in broken beer bottles and all kinds of other trash. They have zero respect for the land and people living in it. It's almost to the point where I can't even enjoy the beautiful nature around my home because of these effing halfwits.
I actually had a friend last year who he walked the entire Appalachian Trail. He's a retired guy. Extremely nice, though. He made sure he cleaned up every single bit of trash that he had. He made sure not to disturb nature or anything like that. And also, part of the trip was him stopping at all these towns and getting to know people. And he made friends along the way and just learned about their town and, things around it. That's the way to do things. Treat people nice. Treat nature with respect. And, you'll probably have a better time.
Story 3. You used to be one of the only few people around bidding on storage lockers. It used to be a fun hobby I gave up on because it became too popular and people are grossly overpaying for the lockers, which is often just paying to make a dump run for someone. My mom put all my stuff in a storage locker when I went abroad and then lost it for not paying for 8 months and lying about it. I lost everything I owned since childhood except for 2 suitcases of clothes I had brought with me to study abroad. All my photos, journals I had kept religiously since I was 5 years old, mementos, stories, poems, and paintings, thousands of dollars of rare books, stuff I hope to digitize and or give to my kids someday. I tried to find out what happened to my stuff after I found out what happened, but whoever bought the unit threw everything away. Now when I see ads for those shows, I just feel sick to my stomach. Had the same thing happen with my dad. I moved to another city temporarily for a seasonal job, and my dad said he'd pay for a storage locker for all my stuff while I was gone. He ended up not paying any of it and lying about it the whole time and until the unit was sold off. Finding out all the irreplaceable things you've accumulated over the years are just gone with no way to get them back is a horrible feeling. My condolences. My old next-door neighbor bought the contents of a storage unit and after finding nothing of any real value, almost threw everything out before he found an old letter with an address. Paid a month's rent on the unit and left the stuff there while he tried to see if he could find anything. He was able to find out that the original owner had died, but got in contact with her kids, and for the cost of the month's rent, he was able to return a lot of sentimental objects to them. Give it a couple of years. The people doing that will run out of money eventually. In the meantime, you could go and not bid, then offer reasonable sums on anything that catches your eye to the people who have just bid too much. They'll be looking to quickly capitalize on the money they've just burned, are still riding high on the endorphins from winning on a big purchase, and you're at ground zero for a quick appraisal and access to choice items. Might not work, but it'd certainly give you back some of the fun without all of the risk, plus you might get to stick it to the people who keep you from your hobby. Story 4. Craft fairs. Now they're crowded with dozens of MLMs. I just want to find knitted slippers made by an old lady who clearly has a drinking problem, not more Norwex. My cousin sells Mary Kay and always sets up a booth at craft fairs. She puts up signs saying, "Support your small business." Huh? Those people see themselves as successful independent entrepreneurs who have pulled themselves up by their own bootstraps and are totally responsible for it all. They do, until it goes under, as did a certain kid's clothing one last week. And then it's all, us poor moms were fired with no notice. I'm sorry, I thought you were the boss babes with your own business. How did you get fired? One of the small towns I've lived in has an annual street fair. Used to be great as you'd have local artists and crafters, local food trucks, and kids' rides. And while it did bring in outside people for the day, it was predominantly locals, so you'd wander around and stop often to chat. Local politicians decided to set up a booth one year. The next year, the opponent did the same thing, and now one whole street of the fair is just filled with local politicians handing out flyers and trying to get people to vote for them. Really dragged down the tone of the fair. Luckily, the craft fairs I do in my area are selective on that kind of stuff, and it's mostly crafters and a few local businesses. I haven't done any craft fairs since COVID started, but I want to. I'm a hobby crafter, so I end up with all kinds of stuff on my table when I go. I get more crap from the other sellers than I do from the folks checking the fair out. I actually make my stuff sourced from suppliers that are either in my state or at least in the same country. I also don't dye my products, so my candles and wax melts are the color of the fragrance, which can be super neat looking depending on the fragrance. When we were doing shows, though, we were often one of the few that were not MLMs.
I love craft fairs, but they are for hobbyists and small businesses. They are a venue for them to get their product out to people, get, people hearing about them and all that kind of stuff. For folks who can't afford to buy like a real storefront or whose business is new enough to where they might not know if they can support a full storefront. So all of you MLMs, please just burn down. But for the rest of the bigger businesses out there, stay out of the craft fairs. It's going to make the people who should be there happier, and it's going to make the people shopping at them happier.
What are you effing sick of?
Story 1. Verbal abuse. I'm a veterinary nurse at a charity practice, and we all get shouted at and outright threatened far too often, despite treatment being free. Registered vet tech here, I completely understand, and you have my sympathies. Not to mention, the pay sucks. No wonder there's a shortage. I feel for you and absolutely appreciate you. You are doing tremendous deeds for little helpless souls who are voiceless. F those piles of crap in skin suits, and I hope whatever they say to you comes back to them 100-fold. Thank you for doing the work you do. I have nothing but respect for you and all the vet staff. Do you find it's worse since the pandemic? I'm seeing so many front-facing customer service employees saying it's much, much worse. I started working as a veterinary assistant not too long after the start of the pandemic, so I don't have much to compare it to, but it seems like clients are getting more and more angry that we still mostly offer curbside, aside from new client exams and, of course, euthanasias, and require clients to wear masks if they come in the building. The other day, my first client conversation of the day went like this, almost exactly verbatim. "How are you today?" "I'm good, thank you. How are you?" "I'm so angry that I still can't come inside that I could strangle someone." "I'm sorry about that." "No, you aren't." We've also had clients rant to us about believing the conspiracy of the pandemic and all sorts of garbage like that. I'm glad that my boss doesn't tolerate the mistreatment of staff and won't hesitate much to fire abusive clients, but it can still be rough. When clients tell me they appreciate me, it makes me want to cry because it's so nice to hear after everything else we deal with. I hope anyone reading this who treats veterinary staff and all customer service people as well, like actual human beings, makes such a difference in our day, and we remember your kindness. All right, folks. I don't care what your stance is on, the pandemic and masks or whatever, or just rules of a business that you don't like. If you're going into that business, you're going to abide by their rules. Just like if they came to your house and you said, oh, we take our shoes off in here, you would expect them to do that. And if you are upset about that stuff and you want to complain, you know who you don't do it to? The front-facing customer service employees who didn't make those rules in the first place and aren't the ones that you actually have a problem with. And when you treat them like crap, you are the piece of crap in that scenario. You're a bad person at that point, and you need to reel it in and rethink some things. Story 2. Ads. It's an abusive amount. A second-by-second onslaught of marketing invading your personal space in every aspect of life. I resent ads. The nanosecond Google said ad blockers are going to stop working on Chrome. I uninstalled it and went back to Firefox. I all but visibly flinch when I get on someone's computer that doesn't have ad block running. I truly do not understand how people can put up with that crap. The moment ad blockers stop working is the moment I stop using the internet for anything other than necessity. I quit watching TV a decade ago over commercials, and I'll ditch the internet too. Leela, didn't you have ads in the 20th century? Fry. Well, sure, but not in our dreams, only on TV and radio, and in magazines, and movies, and at ball games, and on buses, and milk cartons, and t-shirts, and written on the sky, but not in dreams. No siree. People are taking the pee out of you every day. They butt into your life, take a cheap shot at you, and then disappear. They leer at you from tall buildings and make you feel small. They make flippant comments about buses that imply you're not attractive enough, and that all the fun is happening somewhere else. They're on TV making your girlfriend feel inadequate. They have access to the most sophisticated technology the world has ever seen, and they bully you with it. They are the advertisers, and they are laughing at you. You, however, are forbidden to touch them. Trademarks, intellectual property rights, and copyright law means advertisers can say what they like, whenever they like, with total impunity. F that. Any advert in a public space that gives you no choice whether you see it or not is yours. It's yours to take, rearrange, and reuse. You can do whatever you like with it. Asking for permission is like asking to keep a rock someone just threw at your head. You owe the companies nothing, less than nothing. You especially don't owe them any courtesy. They owe you. They have rearranged the world to put themselves in front of you. They never asked for your permission. Don't even start asking for theirs. Banksy. I remember growing up in the 90s and early 2000s how I used to think that the fact that, a half an hour TV show was only 23 minutes of the show and 7 minutes of ad. It's like, that's over 20% is just ads. That's ridiculous. And it's so much worse. Granted, streaming commercials and stuff like that on if you get Hulu with ads or whatever, it's probably less than that now. So you might think, oh, well, that's better. But every little thing you have, especially on your phones and computers, is just ads everywhere. They track you all around. They feed you a constant stream of ads based on every little thing you do. It's pretty gross and really dystopian. When you see cyberpunk, style things where it's look how bad ads have gotten. If you really look at how they present it, it's no, they're worse than that now.
Story 3. Surviving instead of thriving. With everything going up in price like crazy, I was doing good, now surviving. I now make double what I made just before the pandemic, which was basically minimum wage. I was absolutely poor then, couldn't afford anything except food and rent and utilities, really. Now I can afford that and a bit more. I am very slowly working towards building the funds for other survival necessities. A bit of money for clothing because my bras are 8 years old and my body is changed and they hurt, an emergency fund for a few months, saving for an eye appointment and glasses and a mattress that won't break my back. Eventually, my 10-year-old laptop will need replacing. I've doubled my salary in the past 2.5 years and I still feel like I'm just surviving. I'm just going to be playing catch up for the next 2 years because everything I own is broken or will soon break. And I have more than most of the world does, and it's still not thriving. What the F? You're not the only one. I was homeless 5 years ago. I now own my own media company and make very good money editing weddings/shooting videos/photos. And it's like every time I get a leg up, the ladder falls another rung and everything goes up in price. It's like you're making these insane strides, but you're on a treadmill, so you just stay in place, just surviving. It's effing bullcrap, to be honest. Story 4. Being drowsy all the effing time. I hear ya. Maybe consider getting your iron levels checked. Apologies for the unsolicited advice. I only say this in case it's helpful. I've been falling asleep and had no energy for ages. Had no idea how low my iron was. Felt immediately better after 2 days of supplements. Edit. Just to mention, it will usually take a long while to get iron levels back up and often requires a full blood count and prescribed tablets. I think I was just pre-anemic that even after a couple of supplements I noticed a difference because my body needed them so badly. If you are taking iron supplements or higher dosage prescribed tablets, it's important to take them with vitamin C. I'll eat oranges, as this can help the absorption. Avoid caffeine as this limits absorption. Lastly, it is always worth getting checked up with your GP/doctor and asking for a full blood test if you're feeling run down and tired all the time, as something else may be going on. It may not be low iron, and there are other things you could be low in, for example, B12, vitamin D, etc. Nah, these replies are helpful regardless. The main problem for my sleep is my work schedule. I go from 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 12 a.m. nearly every day except Fridays and Saturdays. Most of those nights I struggle to maintain sleep due to work exhaustions, and my body isn't fully relaxed before bed. If you have insurance or the means, you might think about a sleep study. You can even do a take-home one. Turns out I have sleep apnea. I went into it with the incorrect assumption that it's something that only affects older or overweight people. Changed my life. Story 5. Littering. It's pure laziness. Put it in your pocket, bag, whatever. Just bin it when you can. I hear you. I live in Canada, and everywhere I go, there are red Tim Hortons coffee cups all over the ground. Everywhere. I am so sick of this. Where I live, it has gotten out of control. I'm particularly sick of cigarette butt littering. I don't care if you smoke, but why do you have to flick it on the ground? All of the apartment buildings I've lived at are just full of butts littered around. There are ashtrays for a reason. I don't get it. It's just inconsiderate and gross.
I'm 100% with these people. I mean, look, the actual problems with like the environment and pollution, those are big corporations. They are just pumping out, plastic disposable crap everywhere, chemicals. It's bad. Littering isn't responsible for that, but littering is still a bad thing, especially for like nature and just public spaces. It can be bad for, your local community, and it's just rude. Don't.
Story 6. People treating each other like crap. I'm tired of people being ugly to each other. Everybody just yells and screams at each other. Nobody's civil anymore. Nobody thinks what it's like to be the other guy. People have forgotten the treat others the way you want to be treated thing recently. Everybody hates me until they need me. What professions are examples of this?
Story 1. Plastic surgeons. My uncle is a plastic surgeon, and he does only reconstructive stuff, fixing burn victims' faces and stuff like that. But when people ask him what kind of doctor he is and he says plastic surgeon, they usually kind of scoff. It is often forgotten, but plastic and cosmetic surgery got a big start in the aftermath of World War I. There were plenty of vets with horrible disfigurements that were met with horror and revulsion returning to civilian life. The operations they took to repair, replace lost jaws, eyes, bones, etc. were attempts to let these vets be able to enjoy some normalcy in society. Yeah, there are before and after pictures out there of early plastic surgeries, and it's genuinely amazing to see what the pioneers of that discipline were actually capable of, considering the tools that they had to work with and the fact that they were just kind of figuring it out as they went along. I've had a few moles removed by various dermatologists, huge unsightly scars, which is fine because they were on my arm and torso, places where no one sees, doesn't matter what they look like. But I also had this big one right on my forehead, and I wanted to get rid of it just because of how unsightly it was. I went to a plastic surgeon, cost me $800. There's absolutely nothing there. Nothing. I guess maybe if I wrinkle my forehead, you can see a tiny line there, but you wouldn't even notice it. I was very pleased. Note, yes, I had it checked. I had checked my dermatologist before I got it removed. He said it wasn't a mole to worry about, and removing it would just be cosmetic. Amen. My wife was hit by a drunk driver riding her bike when she was 14. They had to completely rebuild her face. She said that it took her years to recognize herself in the mirror. She only has a couple of small scars. I can only see one. At 58, she looks very much like that 18-year-old I fell in love with in college. We dated in college, went our separate ways, reconnected in 2017, married 2 years ago. Without the surgeries, she would have been horribly disfigured and she would have hidden away from the world. With the reconstruction, she went to college, served in the Peace Corps, and had a great career. Plus, it is hard to let someone love you when you don't love yourself. Thanks to her plastic surgeons. Edit. Hit return too soon. My friend, who is a trauma surgeon, always jumps to the defense of cosmetic plastic surgeons with a very legit argument. The way people look can be extremely important to those people's mental health and their everyday life in general, especially women. What these surgeons do can prevent depression, self-termination tendencies, various other psychiatric and psychological issues, can save marriages and boost confidence in a workplace, etc. These surgeries can literally improve the quality of people's lives, superficial or not, based on how many are done in countries all over the world that don't necessarily share similar cultures. It is very important to a lot of people. I agree. I'm not into cosmetic surgery at all, to each their own, but I did see a doc that specializes in reconstructive surgery after being in a really bad accident that left a very noticeable scar over more than a quarter of my face. I ended up not having any procedures done, but it did make me realize plastic surgery isn't all about getting lip injections or breast augmentation. It can often be about making someone look and feel normal again so they can function in society without trauma and anxiety. Docs like your uncle rock. Yeah, while I'm certain that there are, there are certainly plastic surgeons out there who are trying to take advantage of people's insecurities, and there are people out there who maybe abuse plastic surgery and kind of abuse their bodies a little bit in the process, but for the most part, I'm very supportive of it. For a lot of these people who are injured, it's wonderful to be able to get to, feel a little normal and get rid of some of those scars and everything. And for people who just want to, feel better about their body, that's not a bad thing. We all do different things to some extent, getting a new haircut, buying clothes that makes us look good, and sometimes being able to change your body to better suit how you want it to be and give yourself confidence. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it requires some very careful thought in making sure that you're not just feeling pressured by society to do it, and I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into it that, a therapist and a doctor, a plastic surgeon should go over with you before you make those decisions. But yeah, I'm generally in support.
Story 2. The U.S. Coast Guard for fishermen and boaters. Usually there's a pretty good working relationship between them, but some hate the Coast Guard for the various inspections they do. But the USCG is also the ones who will come out there in a storm to rescue them. Today I learned people hate the Coast Guard. They're like the military police, and you don't have rights on the water like you do on land with normal police. They're generally good and responsible, but I also understand why people have negative feelings towards them. I'm not from the USA. Could you elaborate, please? The U.S. Constitution, the Fourth Amendment to it, protects Americans or any person in the United States against unreasonable search. It's why police have to obtain a warrant before entering your house. The exception to this is the Coast Guard and searching your boat. The U.S. Coast Guard can search any boat in U.S. waters and any U.S. flagged vessel anywhere in the world at any time they please for any reason. All that said, I've had nothing but pleasant encounters with the Coast Guard, though I'm Canadian and my boat flies a Canadian flag. I'm always a contentious/safety-oriented boater, so never have issues. U.S. Coast Guard are 100% a real branch of the military, and anyone who says otherwise hadn't seen an offshore rescue performance. Those guys are the real deal. Edit. Allegiance to DHS instead of DoD is irrelevant. It's a 20-year argument for a 240-year organization. By that logic, the U.S. Coast Guard was military until 20 years ago. Edit 2. And the U.S. Coast Guard is officially defined as military under Title 10 and Title 14. Suck on it, losers! Even if I'm wrong about prior United States Coast Guard allegiances, U.S. Code Title 10 defines the United States Coast Guard as military, and Title 14 defines U.S. Coast Guard as military at all times. You are either loyal to the code or you are not. I'm a merchant marine based out of the U.S., and the Coast Guard is by far the most strenuous with their inspections compared to the rest of the world. Sometimes you'll get a-holes that will get you technicalities. I know it's in the name of safety and it's for good reason, but for example, when you get fined for not having the proper sticker that's supposed to be a 7 by 7 inches when yours is only 6 by 6 inches, next to where your life jackets are stowed even when they are correctly and clearly labeled, no wonder why they have that pain-in-the-butt reputation they do. They want to see everything is correct according to the law, even though it necessarily wouldn't save a life. It can be too much sometimes, but I get the reason for it. I ship out to Europe and the Middle East, and the U.S. Coast Guard is the most nail-biting compared to any other country. They are notoriously harder on foreign ships compared to U.S. ships. Of course, it depends on the actual people inspecting, too. Some, probably most Coast Guard inspectors wouldn't give a crap about something like the example I mentioned above, but you never know what kind of inspector you're going to get. We have a joke that Coast Guard inspectors graduated at the bottom of their class and ended up stuck doing inspections, which is why they're all a-holes. But the real good ones are out there leading the search and rescue missions. There's probably not much truth to it, though, and it's just a made-up stereotype that sailors have made up. Story 3. Lawyers and mechanics. You want to have a good one for each, but you never want to have to call either of them. Finding a good mechanic will 99% of the time save you the most money out of most of these answers. Finding one that's skilled but doesn't rip you off is an effing godsend. I didn't realize this until I married someone whose father is a mechanic. The amount of BS I no longer deal with is unbelievable. If you find a good mechanic, don't pee them off nickel and diming them. My friends think I'm crazy for driving to a mechanic that's 45 minutes away, but this shop has only done me good. Brought my car in for a suspected problem, they found no issue, never charged me. Another time, the car was having major issues. After a day at the shop, the mechanic called me and straight up told me the $3,000 it would cost to repair the car would be better off on a down payment instead of repairs that may or may not fix the issue. I like that they pay their staff by the hour, too. Brought my car in for a suspected problem, they found no issues, never charged me. Oh my god, this comment brought to mind something that happened a few years ago. I thought the car was leaking a weird color antifreeze. It was deer pee on the snowy driveway. Thankfully, the car guy told us nothing was wrong with the car, lol. Had a problem with my car dying once in a city an hour from home. Had it towed to the closest place I could find. It started up and the guy couldn't find anything wrong with it. Found no issues. Didn't charge me. He has it most of the day. Said maybe bad gas or moisture in my gas tank. Started to die on the way home at night. Dropped it off to my regular guy. He couldn't tell what was wrong with it, but knew something wasn't right. Told me he could start throwing parts at it, but couldn't guarantee they'd help. Suggested bringing it to the dealer. Again, don't charge me. Ended up needing a new transmission that Nissan actually replaced out of warranty at no charge. F their CVTs, but yeah, honest mechanics are great.
I think I once heard, I think it was an uncle of mine once said, there are two things in this life that you hang on to for dear life. The person you fall in love with and a good mechanic. And it's true. I feel very fortunate that for most of my mechanical needs, my brother is knowledgeable enough and can help me out. And in return, I have nothing of value to offer him. I don't have any skill sets aside from what you're seeing here, so that's it. Oh, God.
What is something debunked as propaganda that is still widely believed?
Story 1. That the McDonald's hot coffee lady was an unreasonable a-hole. Edit, I've now muted because holy crap, if you're the kind of person who can go read what actually happened and still decide to side with a giant multinational corporation, which has also lied about a whole host of other things, including the monopoly crap and also feeding us pink slime over the little old lady that they melted, then you don't have the IQ or the empathy for me to want to interact with you. My God, I hope the next time each of you does something moderately dumb like spill your drink, you're met with the excruciating, life-altering negative consequences since you all want to keep trying to blame her. That poor lady, for real. She was just trying to pay her medical bills. She was covered in third-degree burns and didn't initially want to sue. Also, McDonald's had agreed to lower the coffee temperature as part of a previous lawsuit and never did. McDonald's had been sued several times over this issue and they ignored it, presumably because they thought it would be cheaper to pay the lawsuit than fix the machines. The judge rightfully threw the book at them. It was more than fixing machines. They intentionally made it that hot and did not want to change to fill the area with coffee aroma and discourage free refills since it took so long to cool down to a drinkable temperature. I've never come across a plausible reason they were serving hot lava as a beverage, but the part about discouraging refills makes sense. It would be too hot to consume unless you hung around for a long time after you ordered, so there was a financial incentive to serve it boiling hot. Edit. Lots of replies mention that keeping it super hot reduces having to brew fresh coffee more often. That also makes sense as it saves time and money, but I don't really buy the logic of let's risk injury/lawsuits so our customers can have a great cup of coffee when they get to work. I also don't think our coffee is great because it's really hot makes sense as a marketing strategy. I've literally never heard anyone say they prefer one coffee spot over another because of how hot it is. Corporate decision making is all about the bottom line. When it comes to spending money and having employees handling stuff like refills and brewing new pots of coffee, saving a couple cents here and there millions of times adds up to significant financial motivation. I highly doubt these decisions were made with the best interest of the customer in mind. Yeah, we've talked about Hot Coffee Lady before, and I've still seen people in our comments trying to argue against it, but yeah, it's like, oh, she spilled the coffee on herself, so it's her fault. Yeah, but the coffee's supposed to be a temperature where it's like, that might be like a, ooh, ow, I've got some red marks burns or whatever, and she got third-degree burns. That's way too hot. It shouldn't be that hot. It shouldn't be a temperature where an accidental spill can send you to the hospital for a week for skin grafts, which is what she had to have, folks. Like, imagine if you were just holding that cup of coffee and they didn't put the lid on right and it spilled on your hand and your friggin' finger flesh melted off, which would be just like, my bad, goop, 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 goop. No. Jesus.
Story 2. Lie detector tests. They are easily rigged / straight up false most of the time and were outlawed from being used in court as evidence back in the 70s. I don't know why, when YouTubers or crappy reality TV shows use them, many people treat their answers as factual. They aren't. Which is interesting that most law enforcement agencies use them as part of their hiring process. Like, what's the point of using them if they're basically useless? I loathe them. I also admittedly listen to too much true crime podcasting, and mother effer does it get under my skin when a polygraph is used to throw shade at someone. They should not exist. There is no favorable way to even answer the question, will you take a polygraph? You say no, and it's, oh, they have something to hide. But if you take it and fail, well, it's obviously because you're the killer. It's inconclusive. Well, that's just as bad as failing because you didn't pass. You passed the polygraph. Well, of course you did. You're a psychopath, and they always pass because they don't get anxious telling lies. Or you pass it, and that's when people say, well, those aren't even accurate. It's such BS. I'll never, ever take one. And I never, ever judge someone who also won't either. Had to stop watching true crime because of the hugely ridiculous if-then statements plus convictions that really didn't convince me at all, yet the narrator believes it wholeheartedly and unquestionably. Namely, suspicions based on meaningless crap that happens every day unless you were unlucky enough to be near a crime at the time. For example, if you randomly tweak your routine, normally that's seen as harmless, but if a crime happens nearby, suddenly it can be perceived as suspicious. Crap like that. Here's a thought exercise. Randomly at any point in the day when you're alone scrutinizing all your actions and words tests for the past few days and see what looks suspicious. Fun fact, you'll find something. Maybe not every time, but you will find something that appears suspicious that you did that you can't explain easily under the scrutiny of an investigation. The worst are those who don't believe in coincidences. Edit. Wow, I had no idea how many people also recognize these issues. That's oddly reassuring about humanity. Good to know I'm not going crazy.
Okay, I think I'm taking this from Adam Ruins Everything, but as I recall, even the creator of the lie detector test basically was like, this shouldn't be used. This isn't accurate. I should not have done this. Like, it's been proven so many times, but people still want to believe it, probably because of TV and movies, because boy oh boy, do people love to just believe everything they see in TV and movies.
Story 3. The rampant tampering of Halloween candy. Cops found a bunch of fentanyl in candy boxes and then acted like they saved thousands of children's lives. Idiots think they distribute the stuff in the same boxes they smuggle it in. I've heard that a lot of people aren't going to let their kids go trick-or-treating this year because the cops found a bunch of multicolored fentanyl pills somewhere and somebody thinks it was to be attractive to children. My mom started spouting that crap and I asked her how that made sense. Why would a fentanyl dealer give his expensive pills to a bunch of random children? How long would it take to track those sketchy-looking pills back to that house? What is the upside of ODing a bunch of toddlers on fentanyl? She didn't know. She just saw it on the news. Sure enough, a couple of days later, I saw the news making some unsourced allegations that cops are worried about this. Fentanyl is just the new law enforcement boogeyman to justify their existence and out-of-control budgets. Edit. I didn't mean my last paragraph to suggest that fentanyl isn't a problem. It clearly is. But that doesn't mean the authorities aren't amping up the fear so they use it to justify all sorts of bad things. I've been around for the entire war on some drugs, and I've seen the authorities use one drug after another to get the public to accept larger and larger budgets, militarization of police, repression, racial disparity in sentencing, no-knock warrants, stop and frisk, and all sorts of stretches and violations of the Fourth Amendment. None of these efforts have reduced the demand for illegal drugs one bit, and in some cases, marijuana, LSD, and other hallucinogens, have delayed legitimate medical research into positive medical uses for these drugs. Illegal use of fentanyl needs to be curtailed, but that doesn't mean they have to hype it to hysterical levels of fear just to get a candidate elected or advance an authoritarian agenda. My parents said the same thing. I asked them the same question. My dad's answer was that it wasn't to harm them, it was to give kids a taste and get them hooked. He 100% believed this. I rolled my eyes and told him he was believing a bunch of baloney. Love my parents, but they'll believe almost anything they hear. Story 4. That plastics are easily recyclable and that MSG is bad for you. I'm still peeved about recycling being yet another way for corporations to dump responsibility on people and take 0% themselves. It's funny, I work as a commercial cleaner, cleaning offices and other buildings. The majority of large offices don't recycle because it costs them extra to have the large bins outside / have it picked up. But they all have recycling bins in most offices and definitely in spaces customers / guests would be. I assume they think it makes people feel better to throw stuff in the blue bin instead of garbage. But then I come along and dump it all into the same bag and dumpster. It has nothing to do with most people and everything to do with big businesses. The custodian in my apartment building told me this. He basically just lets people know he's required to just throw the recycling in the garbage bin if it doesn't meet 20,000 different requirements. Basically, it's easier to leave the bins empty than face whatever ridiculous fine for red cardboard or a little glue or whatever that will magically ruin all the recycling or something. My significant other worked briefly as a mover and was frequently called into a big corporate office collective to move stuff to and from different buildings and offices, and sometimes to throw away brand new unused office supplies and furniture because it was cheaper than to try to give it away or sell it. Meanwhile, the very same companies are trying to tell us we have to reduce, reuse, recycle. God, it pees me off. I worked in a college bookstore from 97 to 2000. We had a big bin at the end of the semester for recycling books that we weren't buying back. Most of the time, this was because they had purchased their magically formulated quota for the next semester. What that meant was I had to get a dolly and take that heavy butt bin out back and toss the books in the dumpster. The bin was about 5 feet high. Since I knew what books were used each semester, I took to dumping the majority of the books into the trunk of my car. I then listed them online. I made extra money from Amazon because they gave you a set amount for shipping, and once someone saw I was in the same town, they wanted to meet up so they could get the book in a few hours, so I got to pocket the shipping costs too. If the bookstore sold the book for $35, I sold it for $20. Sometimes I'd negotiate if the buyer wanted to. The kids felt good that their books were being recycled, and the buyer felt like they got a deal. I made a crapload of money.
Yeah, boy, if you really want to get depressed about stuff, just look into all the problems with the recycling industries, the chemicals involved in paper recycling, how hard it is to recycle plastics, and how long most like plastic recyclings are just stored and not recycled and everything. I think I heard that like aluminum cans and everything are pretty good. So, but what's the alternative? Just don't recycle and pile up landfills? No. The problem is all of these companies that make all of this just disposable plastic waste and stuff like that, just with no regard for the environment. But yeah, no, we're not recycling enough.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.